The confrontation no one anticipated has ignited a fierce, unrelenting response from Prince William inside the palace walls, a response some insiders now describe as total scorched earth policy. What started as an ordinary charity event meant to showcase Princess Anne's long-standing support for rural development has erupted into one of the most startling public challenges to royal dignity in modern memory. Laura Lopes, daughter of Camilla, somehow slipped past layers of security, confronted the Princess Royal directly, and voiced accusations that crossed every line of protocol and discretion. Cameras captured the exchange, and William's subsequent actions are now testing the very foundations of the institution. The setting was the Royal Horticultural Hall, a venue that on any other day would have seemed the least likely stage for high drama. It was a Tuesday afternoon engagement focused on rural development, carefully choreographed so that Princess Anne could move efficiently among local dignitaries, producers, and community leaders. She stood near the main display in her familiar, structured navy coat and signature gold brooch, examining exhibits of agricultural produce with the same steady attention she had brought to countless similar occasions over more than 50 years of public service. The schedule was tight. Everything appeared to be proceeding exactly according to plan. Then Laura Lopes entered through a side door that should have been closed to the public. She was not on the official guest list. She had no formal reason to be inside the building at all. Yet she moved through the dense crowd with unmistakable purpose and stopped only a few feet behind the Princess Royal. There was a brief pause. Then she spoke, loudly, without bowing, without any conventional greeting. She declared that recent sweeping changes to the management of estate finances represented a deep and personal insult to her family. Witnesses later described her tone as aggressive and raised. Consider the gravity of that moment. A woman who had been deliberately excluded from the guest list approached a senior working royal during an official engagement and aired a sensitive family financial grievance in full public view. This was not a spontaneous emotional outburst or a momentary lapse. It was a calculated decision designed to create maximum spectacle. Princess Anne's reaction revealed the steel that has kept her standing for half a century inside an institution that rarely forgives missteps. She did not whirl around or flinch. Instead, she adjusted her gloves with deliberate calm and remained perfectly still for 3 full seconds while the lively hall fell into stunned silence. Rain could be heard drumming against the glass roof. Only then did she turn to face Laura. Her expression was controlled, free of visible anger. She did not address the substance of the accusations at all. She simply asked, in an even voice, whether security had properly reviewed the guest list for the afternoon's engagement. That single question was a masterclass in dismissal. It ignored the inflammatory claims entirely and focused solely on whether Laura had any right to be present. The humiliation was precise, surgical, and far more devastating than any raised voice argument could have been. Viewers, are you impressed by Princess Anne's absolute composure, shutting down an aggressive public ambush with one quiet question about the right to be in the room? Yes or no? Put yes in the comments if you believe she remains the unshakable backbone of the royal family. And if you respect her 50 years of steady service, yet continue watching without subscribing, you are quietly supporting the kind of entitled outsiders who believe they can publicly challenge the crown. Subscribe now, like this video, and share it with anyone who values strict royal protocol. Laura, now flushed with anger, stepped closer. She accused Princess Anne of directing the current financial audit specifically to damage Camilla's family, of hiding behind outdated rules, and of participating in secret meetings with the Prince of Wales that everyone in the palace supposedly knew about. Her voice carried across the polished floor. Reporters in the back rows scrambled for notebooks. A freelance photographer had already trained a long lens on the exchange from the start. The rapid click of the shutter was audible. Someone had ensured the moment would be recorded. Princess Anne signaled her protection officer. The officer moved swiftly through the startled crowd and firmly directed Laura toward the lobby, making clear that her presence was no longer appropriate. The entire confrontation lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it shattered the carefully maintained atmosphere of the event. News of how Laura had gained entry raced through the palace corridors. Security at the main entrance had been rigorous. Investigation revealed that a local regional director, someone with a distant personal connection to Camilla's circle, had, at the last minute, manually added Laura's name to a restricted list after receiving a VIP invitation request. Staff later examined the electronic access logs with growing alarm. The director was suspended by evening for a serious breach of Tier 1 security protocols. That, however, was only the opening act of the larger crisis. Prince William learned of the incident while on a high-level conference call. He ended the call mid-sentence and ordered his chief of staff to secure the raw, unedited footage from the freelance photographer at any cost. He wanted unfiltered evidence of exactly what had been said and how far the disrespect had gone. Those close to him reported that he was not looking for a public relations solution or a quiet diplomatic fix. He wanted irrefutable proof of misconduct. In his private office, described as unusually cold that evening, he sat in near darkness and watched the footage on a large screen. He noted Laura's posture, the reactions of those nearby, and the speed with which the situation had escalated. At that moment, he concluded that the era of patience, compromise, and blended family politics was over. He picked up a secure line, contacted the king, and stated firmly that he was assuming full control of the disciplinary response. He did not request permission or propose a meeting. He simply informed the monarch of the facts and of the consequences he intended to impose. The king listened in silence and then authorized William to take whatever steps were necessary to protect the institution. William moved immediately into operational mode. Shortly after 6 o'clock, he entered a basement briefing room still wearing his coat. He walked to the center of the mahogany table, placed his phone down hard, and faced 5 senior aides holding preliminary reports. Using a remote, he projected the raw footage onto the wall screen. The sound of the shutter clicks filled the room. He let the uncomfortable exchange play in silence. When it ended, he switched off the projector and demanded to know how a woman barred from official engagements had been allowed to bypass royal security. His gaze settled on the director of security. The man began an explanation. William cut him off. He did not want excuses. He wanted a name. He ordered that the individual responsible be removed from post, escorted from the premises, and legally constrained before the morning news cycle. The security failure at the charity event was, in his view, only a symptom. The larger command structure of the household was at risk. For the previous 2 months, William had been systematically identifying and removing staff whose loyalties appeared tied more closely to Camilla's family than to the core institution. He now recognized that he was fighting a dual battle: public perception outside the walls and internal resistance within them. When a nervous aide tried to explain that the invitation had originated from a regional office, William asked coldly whether that office had been fully briefed on the strict rules applying to Camilla's relatives. The aide nodded. William then asked why the warning had been ignored. Pressure had come from higher up, the aide admitted. William demanded the name. Silence followed. He reached for a secure red-tagged folder labeled Internal Influences. Inside was information linking the pressure to a mid-level palace manager whose spouse worked as a personal assistant in Camilla's household. William ordered the manager removed at once. Within 20 minutes, armed security escorted the individual out through the rear gates. The message throughout the palace was unmistakable. The heir was no longer merely waiting. He was actively clearing the household of divided loyalties. To understand the full weight of the episode, it is necessary to consider Princess Anne's perspective. On the drive back from the Horticultural Hall, she sat upright in the rear of the state car, hands folded over her handbag, gaze fixed forward. She did not call her private secretary or check her phone. Instead, she replayed the confrontation in her mind. The timing, the exact words used, the breach of protocol. For Anne, protocol is not optional decoration. It is structural protection for the monarchy itself. When she finally spoke, her tone remained measured. She asked for the identity of the regional director who had issued the unauthorized invitation and observed that the defense of the monarchy begins at the front door. She had deliberately refrained from intervening more forcefully during the confrontation. She could have summoned her protection officer sooner or used her rank to quiet the room immediately. Instead, she allowed the exchange to unfold so that she could observe who was watching and how they reacted. When her assistant later handed her the printed attendance list, she recognized the names of 3 local journalists known to maintain friendly ties with Camilla's circle. They had followed the confrontation with particular interest. Anne concluded that the episode was not a spontaneous emotional outburst. It was a media-oriented event. For months, she had been the target of efforts to undermine her reputation because she stood in the way of greater influence over royal estates. Her insistence on a rigorous financial audit had blocked attempts to loosen long-standing rules of estate management. As she rode back, she considered who could have leaked details of the confidential audit. Only a handful of senior figures had been aware of it. After reviewing the timeline, she suspected the leak might have originated closer to the monarch's own office than anyone wished to admit. She contacted a trusted figure within intelligence channels and requested a discreet trace of encrypted communications related to the audit, determined to follow any digital trail that pointed to an internal source. When she arrived at Buckingham Palace, she noticed lights still burning in Prince William's office. Clearly, he was working the same problem from his own angle. She went to her desk, opened the estate administration files, and began reviewing signatures on audit documents. Patterns emerged that suggested sustained attempts by members of Camilla's family to influence staffing decisions and place preferred individuals in key positions. What she saw looked less like occasional favoritism and more like a gradual effort to gain control over both the power and the finances of the institution. Titles and residences were secondary. Influence over the machinery itself was the real objective. Anne decided she would gather the evidence of interference and then present the king with a clear choice: protect the integrity of the throne or protect the comfort of a marriage. Those who had chosen to confront the one member of the family least inclined to yield had made a serious miscalculation. While Anne pursued her own inquiries, William's team uncovered further concerning signals. Encrypted communications had taken place between Camilla's mobile device and a prominent city law firm at times that coincided with key stages of the quiet audit. William suspected preparations were underway for legal resistance aimed at shielding substantial sums the audit was designed to examine. He asked his chief legal advisor whether the accounts under scrutiny could be lawfully frozen to prevent any sudden movement of funds. The advisor warned that the structures involved were complex trusts deliberately placed outside Easy Palace jurisdiction. William turned to a large wall map of royal holdings currently under review and ordered a comprehensive examination of every relevant land title for hidden liabilities or irregularities. The Prince of Wales was working to keep his own composure under pressure. He had watched the institution absorb repeated scandals and had seen its dignity eroded by private interests. He resolved to become a barrier against further decline. He instructed his exhausted team to maintain strict containment for the next 48 hours. No leaks, no public disputes. Anyone speaking to the press, even privately, would face the full force of the non-disclosure agreements they had signed. He contacted the king again to report that the immediate situation at the hall was under control, but that he was now moving into the final phase of internal reform. He needed full institutional backing. He requested approval for a formal decree that would remove Camilla's family members from any remaining official roles or access within the palace. The king, visibly warned by the succession of conflicts, gave his consent. After viewing the footage himself, he had felt the personal sting of the public disrespect. Meanwhile, Laura Lopes sat in a dimly lit living room surrounded by half-packed boxes, scrolling through the volume of hostile comments that had already generated millions of interactions online. A cold anxiety settled in her chest. She had intended to defend her mother. Instead, she felt she had triggered a crisis far larger than she anticipated. Her brother entered looking pale and reported that their personal bank accounts were now under formal scrutiny. An automated message had requested legal documentation for every transfer above £5,000. The palace audit had expanded to include their private finances. Pressure was arriving from every direction. The boxes in the room were not accidental. They had been instructed to vacate the estate offices by the end of the week. Their names were being erased from palace plans. Prince William was dismantling the privileged arrangements they had long taken for granted, and they felt powerless to stop him. The question that troubled Laura most was why her mother had not intervened more forcefully on their behalf. She had expected Camilla to use her position to negotiate some form of quiet settlement. Instead, Camilla had withdrawn, becoming almost a ghost within her own household. Laura began to wonder whether her mother was sacrificing her children's standing in order to preserve her own place within the monarchy. At that moment, a black car appeared on the long driveway. A courier delivered a sealed package from Camilla's trusted solicitor. Inside was a stark letter of legal advice. It instructed absolute silence. Any public statement, interview, or social media activity would result in the permanent severing of remaining ties to the royal estates. This was not abandonment. It was a final attempt to keep them out of a criminal courtroom. Unmistakable evidence of serious financial irregularities had been uncovered. William was assembling material that could be referred to investigatory authorities. The audit had identified multiple fund movements that could not be satisfactorily explained. As Laura read the letter, the weight of the situation settled more heavily upon her. They had treated the royal household as a private resource rather than an institution requiring respect. She tried to reach a key contact at the financial firm managing their trust accounts. The number had been disconnected. She realized William had already moved beyond the boundaries she had assumed still existed. The protective structures around their hidden arrangements had been dismantled. On the following Monday, the Privy Council chamber at Buckingham Palace was lit by strong natural light falling across the stone floor. At opposite ends of a long table stood only two men. Prince William held a formal decree written on heavy paper. He passed it to the king. The language was clear and severe. With immediate effect, it removed members of Camilla's family from any official status connected to the royal household. They would lose access to invitations, to residual funds from estate accounts, and to any remaining formal association. Viewers, if you agree that Prince William and King Charles were right to adopt a scorched earth approach, permanently stripping Camilla's family of royal privileges and cutting off access to hidden funds, put yes in the comments. Like the video, share it, and subscribe. Anyone who admires the Prince of Wales's determination to protect the monarchy from financial sabotage, yet leaves without subscribing, is failing to give the future king the public support he needs for his hardest decisions. Let the palace see that true royalty demands strict accountability. Hit subscribe now to register that support. The king signed the document without looking up, tracing the royal seal with his finger. He had reviewed the financial records that demonstrated attempts to treat the monarchy as a personal resource and understood the necessity of decisive action. A messenger delivered the final copy of the decree to Camilla's country residence. Palace staff waited for a reaction, an angry telephone call, a demand for a meeting, a formal protest. Hours passed. Afternoon became evening. The king's telephone remained silent. The courier eventually returned with an empty envelope. Camilla had signed the decree without a word. She requested neither a meeting nor a protest. She accepted the hard terms of her isolation. Prince William, observing the courtyard, recognized that he had won the immediate contest. Yet Camilla's complete silence suggested the larger struggle might not be finished. She had withdrawn into the shadows, but the underlying tension remained, and the possibility of a future countermove could not be dismissed.